No, todavía no.
Muy buenas tardes. Muy buenas tardes.
No.
Muy buenas tardes. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas otra vez.
Good afternoon. Welcome once again to this day of seminars for IDB and IDB Invest. We are ready to proceed with our agenda. The next one is Innovation for Impact, Fostering AI for Impact and Sustainability. Current circumstances in Latin America and the Caribbean has chronic lack of growth, and AI offers opportunities to close this gap. And to delve deeper into this, we would like to invite Cristina Garmeñas Mendizábal, President of Fundación Cotec. Cristina, welcome.
Pues muy buenas tardes a todas las.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've heard the previous sessions where the issue of AI and technology has been discussed. We're in complex times. It's a period with great uncertainty, but it's also fascinating because obviously AI is offering us tools and resources that we could not have dreamed of before. AI is useful to draft speeches, and I assure you that my statement was not drafted with AI, but I can also confess that this speech is a speech that I did not write myself. These words that I will share with you are part of an exercise of collective human intelligence in a meeting in a forum that we organized in the Cotec Foundation in Madrid a few weeks ago. And it was a cross-disciplinary workshop. AI is boosting our capacities, and we had participation of many people with various profiles. We had technical experts, scientists, sociologists, philosophers, expert AI researchers. There was somebody from Google working with us precisely the week that Google launched co-scientists. It's been extremely interesting. Our foundation has been around for about 30 years, and this has been the most interesting meeting that we've organized. Why? For two reasons. First, given the depth of the issues that were discussed, and secondly, given the diversity of people that participated. And who knows whether in the short term, it's not the most important meeting that we've held, not just the most interesting one, but the most important one, because based on how AI will evolve, this technology could redefine the knowledge economy, which is the core of studies at the Kotek Foundation. Innovative knowledge today is a scarce resource that depends mainly on internal talent in organizations, but it also has to do with talent that can be developed internally or bought from the market or obtained through collaboration. But if AI could generate this knowledge, if AI could generate knowledge in an automatic, fast, and on-demand way, then the rules of the game would change forever. It's easy to envision two economic scenarios that seem to be at odds, but could happen simultaneously, and they could apply to sectors and geographies. If we think that this AI, which we will call autonomous AI, becomes a commodity like internet, its generalized use could democratize discoveries and inventions. But it would do it to a point that the competitive advantage of promoters, scientists, and researchers, that competitive advantage would be residual. And there would be minimum incentives to safeguard results via IP protection. We have asked some economists through the debate and beyond, and economists can't find an agreement. They cannot reach an agreement on the consequences of that exponential growth of competition as a result of synthetic innovations that would come from AI. I initially started working in biotech, where IPR protection was ultimately one of the objectives we pursued. Now that I'm working with this group, I have to say that there are some parallels between this hypothetical future and the situation that is already happening in the field of artistic creation. And as a matter of fact, cultural industries are already having to grapple with these dilemmas related to IPR, that are similar to what would be posed by this universal capacity of developing an innovative knowledge. And in many cases, the debate has concluded in terms of copyright. With massive training of these models, it's very difficult to circumscribe inspiration and separate it from copy. It's very difficult to resolve that dilemma. And if we go to the opposite side, thinking about this debate among economists, instead of having a massive use of AI falls under control of some few players, countries, territories. I would imagine economies where it's not science, but the data that feeds into the science, the data that drive that scientific research produced by humans or AI. If you don't have access to those data, then that science would not make a difference. Or perhaps you could have economic models where other skills, productive skills, logistical skills, brand management, where you trust a brand regardless of how knowledge was created behind those brands and behind the brand's products and services. Under that scenario, the capacity to create or research would not set you apart. At both extremes, we would be looking at the end of the knowledge economy as we understand it today. But how likely is it that this autonomous AI would supersede human knowledge and talent? That was the question in the workshop, and we quickly discovered how wrong we were in posing the question thusly. Why? Because AI cannot be autonomous in the epistemological sense of the term. It need not be, in fact, to create these major disruptions in the innovation and R&D space. From a knowledge perspective, we can't discuss autonomy in an agent such as AI that has no judgment or reference in the world. We can't attribute intention to a large language model. We can't assume it to represent reality in any way. As a matter of fact, generative intelligence are wrong. They don't hallucinate. We often hear that there's a hallucination. They can't hallucinate. They cannot hallucinate because hallucination is to perceive something as real when it's not. And at the moment, these models don't have senses that help them contrast their data with reality. But we should not underestimate these models and be reductive and interpret them as an inert tool or artifact. We should rather consider them mechanisms and hybrid systems that are only useful to the extent that they can be used and trained by humans. Described thusly as a hybrid mechanism, the sum of humans and tools. It's indeed true that AI does invent and discover, and it will do it better as its experience evolves in the real world. This is the challenge for AI, to advance with experience in the real world. Newton was sitting under a tree, and he watched an apple fall when his intuition led him to think of universal gravitation. This is not possible today for an algorithm, so we can take it for a fact that humans have lost our monopoly as inventors and creators, but we don't cede it entirely to AI. We will share it with them, and from now on we will have augmented intelligence, and the challenge is to find that point of interaction between human ability to discern, to judge, and the quality of data that will turn models into faithful representations of reality. But before this happens, AI will radically transform science. In its current state, research driven by AI has enormous potential, and it forces us to question governance dynamics and obviously conventional research processes. The use of the most advanced agents, these agents with reason, could threaten the transformation of master-disciple knowledge in a world where researchers are rooted in academia, and the fact that you need people undertaking research. These agents can make the work of PhDs easier. So why lose time or waste time training PhDs when you can apply a model? I remember I was discussing this with young researchers, and there was a simple example. The younger scientists or the younger scholars are more comfortable engaging with AI. And one of them said, I engage with the AI 5-6 hours a day, and this is a difference from what my bosses or my seniors do who don't use AI anymore. So we don't know what was going to happen with this master-disciple relationship, but it will be different. We can also wonder what will happen when most papers are drafted by AI. Thus far, scientists had a great incentive in publishing to improve their resumes and their curriculum. Those of us who have been in this field know that most publications are science that isn't cited, and the vast majority of these publications of this literature is not used again, but that's accepted as a minor downside. But that's part of the dynamics of scientific research, because it's difficult to predict where the next leap will come from. But this will be changed by synthetic agents. We can now generate text, songs, and images that were created by more mediocre creators. What is worrisome is that we will find it impossible to distinguish human creators from algorithms. On the same lines, thinking about contemporary science is whether AI will change the bias against negative results. Will science finally be capable of publishing these roads that go the wrong way, and help us try things that have led to failure but lead to knowledge? AI can test infinite hypotheses and share the ones that are erroneous without feeling affected in terms of its prestige or reputation or scholarly levels. Paraphrasing Edison, creation is 1% inspiration and 99% hard work, things that get your shirt wet. And in many cases, AI will help us change these processes radically. One of the people responsible or who participated in this forum, the global responsible for ArcelorMittal, they said that they had developed a new iron with AI, and it took them 43 days to do something that would have taken 3 years otherwise. They did this with private resources. If they had done this with public support, it would have taken at least 6 months to a year in the administrative process of requesting and obtaining the support. And it's unsustainable that the bottleneck is not part of science itself, but it's in science management. And that's another item to consider. And even though AI will shorten the time that researchers will take in drafting their memoirs, and the full model needs to be reconsidered when we talk about innovation and tech sovereignty. Bureaucracy doesn't just slow down our work, and blocks it, because being late sometimes is tantamount to not getting there. And in terms of public policy, it means being wasteful with public funds. During that session, we also heard that applied to biology, AI is helping us read and replicate our biological language and to design original sequences that are not existent in nature. Susana Vasquez, a Mexican biologist, designed proteins that were capable of neutralizing a cobra's poison, venom. And it was proven later with animals that they worked perfectly. And this is a revolution in terms of searching active molecules, but it also reduces the competitive advantages of territories like Latin America and the Caribbean that bet on biodiversity as a source of wealth, because it doesn't require a predicate perspective element in the natural environment, because evolution can be accelerated in a lab. Another one of the objectives of the workshop was to estimate the various scenarios for the short and medium term, 1, 3, and 5 years, and to determine whether this interaction would change experts' perspective. Before we begin the session, we ask participants to select the most likely state for the excellence of science in 4 possibilities: 1, 3, 5, and 10 years, guided by humans, assisted by AI, semi-autonomous, and fully autonomous. By 10 years, the prediction didn't change too much. Before and after, the workshop said about 40% of participants thought it was highly likely that science will reach the maximum level, the autonomous level. However, The debate did dampen initial expectations by experts for the short and medium term. And this leads us to think that just as it happens in other socio-technical processes, rate of speed does not have a bearing on where we are. Recently, Elon Musk, or 5 years ago, Elon Musk said that if 5 years from then, all cars would be autonomous. He was wrong. So technology is always ahead of our ability to adapt to it, and the interest among groups trying to implement this, and the culture that we have for implementation is what ultimately sets the difference. The meeting in Madrid was also a great example of what Michael Polanyi deemed tacit knowledge. This Hungarian philosopher was a pioneer in speculating differences between the human mind and computers. This is back in the 20th century. And he proposed to distinguish explicit knowledge, which can be codified and articulated, from tacit knowledge, which is more personal. It's more difficult to formalize. And his concept is summarized and the fact that humans know more than we can express, and artificial systems are dumber than they seem. So, dear friends, I'm now winding down, but let us not forget that humans, in addition to neurons, have hormones. And the process of exploration and application of knowledge, which we have dubbed innovation and which explains the success of our species, is reliant on thinking and on the activation of hormonal circuits of reward, which are the ones that inspire us and stimulate us to continue. Antonio Damasio talks about Descartes' mistake with a case that explains this link between passion and emotions. He talks about Eliot, a very capable patient. He had a tumor he was operated on, and this damaged his prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that links emotion and reasoning. And what happened? He had preserved his intellectual capacity perfectly, but he wasn't able to decide on things as simple as picking a pen to write with. So this state of chronic indecision shown that very obvious minor things took him hours to decide out, and it had to do, and it was the result, of a minor damage to the area of our brain that connects reason and emotion. And this shows that emotions are not an obstacle to reason, but they are an essential component that guides and prioritizes our selection process. So that's why it's possible that AI, which has read everything but hasn't lived anything, that doesn't feel anything, would require our assessment, our judgment in the end. So let us hold that idea. Today, they require our ultimate review and judgment. But whether it does or not, we need to always oversee AI to ensure that its objectives are aligned with general well-being. We need to embrace technology. We don't have a choice. We need to embrace AI. We need to train our people to ensure that they know how to use it. Otherwise, there will be a chasm between those that use AI and those that don't. But undoubtedly, we need to leverage events such as these, where people are together, united, and come together based on a common interest. Because if we don't do it this way, in a hybrid way, this is the knowledge that is emerging. We need to embrace technology. We need to have a hybrid approach, but with a lot of human contact, so that we can learn about each other's experience in real time. That will be the only way to walk together and thereby go far. So I will show you a very short video of the making of that made this approach possible.
Pienso que esta reunión es la más interesante de todas las.
I think this is one of the most interesting meetings of all the meetings that we have called. There will be autonomous Gen I, or will that be possible? Creativity will no longer be human, it will be hybrid. I don't know how we will train people who will be the human part of the hybrid system that Fernando has mentioned. These AIs thus far don't interact with the world. We have great examples in science where discovery, for example, Newton in gravity, he was just sitting by a tree and he saw an apple fall. This is a tin material that was made by AI and it's being sold. Who can market that material has an expectation. Normally, this would have taken us 3 years. The process was cut short to 43 days. Being late is tantamount to not arriving. So we can't think we can continue to operate the same. Technology is going to support and accelerate, not substitute. AI tools are essential for scientists. 82% believe that their work was less fulfilling. We're neurons, but we're also hormones. And AI is simply not stimulated. AI can enable multidisciplinary collaboration, which in the past was extremely difficult. AI has read everything, but has lived nothing. Thank you, Cristina.
Te agradecemos mucho, Cristina. Fue un verdadero placer escuchar tu presentación y te invitamos a que te sientes y
Thank you very much for your statement and presentation, and we invite you to sit on the panel. Experts will talk about AI and how it can be used to foster growth in the region. We will now invite Irene Arias, COID Lab, to moderate, and we'll invite the panelists, Pablo Zamora, President of Fundación Chile, also Edgardo Frias, Country Director for Chile, Peru, and Colombia for Google, Aisin Echeverri as well, for Minister of Science, Technology, Knowledge, and Innovation for Chile. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to discuss such a relevant current topic. It's a topic that raises a number of concerns, many discussed by Cristina just now, but it also encourages us to dream and to aspire to a different future. We see it as a great tool to help us address the most complex problems the world faces that affect Latin America and the Caribbean in particular, not just productivity, with the examples that Cristina mentioned. It happens in an increasingly accelerated way. AI can address productivity challenges in a more effective, efficient way. It can help us leapfrog and address social challenges, access to health, education, the environment. The meeting that Cristina mentioned also makes clear that pondering on this issue and using AI tools, or rather using human intelligence on digital platforms requires significant collaboration from the private, public sector, and civil society. This panel is the representation of this. We will hear the vision of Minister Echeverri as a leader in the public sector, but we also hear from a big tech company and obviously Pablo, from his perspective, from his current position, but also being an entrepreneur who uses AI, who's made use of it in a spectacular way. So we will learn a great deal through this panel, and we will take on this challenge. I wanted to provide some additional context for this discussion and why we have scheduled this panel. Here I want to recognize Gonzalo Rivas and the IDB team, but last December we launched the AI framework for the Inter-American Development Bank, a comprehensive strategy that seeks to foster responsible adoption of AI and support innovation and inclusive development. And the framework takes on AI potential to work with institutions of governance, data and infrastructure, and people and talent. At the same time, we're not just preparing these frameworks, we are investing in companies that develop AI applications and that use them. We're also working on ensuring that the best standards are implemented, and we are doing this through the Fair Lack initiative, which is aligned with the OECD principles and allows companies, governments, and startups to have a practical way of understanding the repercussions of their algorithmic models vis-a-vis society and systems and solutions, and to work to improve it in all these areas so that the application of AI is indeed something that benefits society at large. At IDB, we've developed LATAM GPT, the first open LLM created for Latin America and the Caribbean by Senia, financed by Bit Ciencias, making IDB publications available to train an inclusive and effective AI for the region. So these are a few examples that prove that achieving this objective requires joint efforts, collaboration, concrete initiatives, and once again, to be able to have these encounters, these meetings where we can have this interaction in a hybrid way across all the different sectors, private, public, civil society. Before I give the floor to the panelists, I'll remind you that there is a QR code that you can use to send your questions, and at the end we will have a Q&A session to interact and address them. So I'll start by Minister Echeverri. I'll start by thanking you, and through you, the Chilean government for being our host and providing such a warm welcome. You have been a firm supporter of adoption and use of AI in Chile. We would love to hear what roadmap you envision to ensure that AI is a vehicle that leverages innovation in the region. And how do you make sure that the technology is not just a technology in itself, that it addresses real problems?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with the rest of the panel. It's hard to know where to start in answering your question. Maybe I should start by telling you what it's been like working with the countries of Latin America, because I do believe that over the last year and a half or 2 years, we have gone through a learning process, and that has enabled us to develop a roadmap. And I think the process was as important as the result. Those of us who've lived and worked in Latin America know that it's not always easy to coordinate with our neighbors. And when it comes to science and technology, it's more common for our entrepreneurs, our scientists to collaborate with Europe or the US rather than with other Latin American countries. So we began to work with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean in the context of AI. And we did so with some reluctance, but we said, let's try it and see what happens. But we really did not have great expectations. The meeting took place in Santiago in 2023. And I think it was instrumental for what came after because it broached work on policies having to do with AI. And I say policy because it's not just looking at AI as a tool, but rather how can it become an accelerator of development in our countries, and also how it does that without jeopardizing or threatening our cosmovision. And it's not just about language, it's about our history, our geography, our culture, how we interact with each other, which is unique, and all of that has to be factored into how we develop it. So the Declaration of Santiago laid out a common vision, and that made it possible for us to engage in an exercise which changed things. We have been holding monthly meetings. We had a meeting in Montevideo last year. This year it will be in the Dominican Republic. And what has happened along the way is that starting with that key component, that common perspective, very clear lines of work have emerged. Someone mentioned ChatGPT. It's harder to be more concrete than that. But we wagered on having a Latin American model, also relying on organizations to trust us and to be willing to put in their data, and to have organizations like the IDB and others providing financing made a difference. And we'll see what comes next year, but it's an example of how you can translate things into a specific vision. When it comes to computational capacity, things are happening. We're working in the countries. We're working on shared models. And I think that is what strengthens our collaboration, which came out of this shared vision. So to answer your question, how do we see the roadmap? It's a roadmap where the components, and we know what they are, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need talent, we need infrastructure, we need researchers. So that is what countries are investing in. That is what we're collaborating on. And we envisage developing and implementing the guideline that in a way that is Latin American and does reflect our realities. Thank you very much. Edgardo, now having heard this, I'd like to ask you to share your perspective based on your own experience with Google. We worked together a year ago, and we had a digital skills and talent course targeted at improving the capacity of exporting MSMEs in this domain. We've seen that the adoption of this guideline by MSMEs is not an easy thing to achieve. So we also had a course on the economics of data to share information about data usage with the companies. And it is a long road, and we'd like to ask you to tell us how you think a sector as important for the Latin American Caribbean economy, in other words, MSMEs, can effectively integrate and adopt this technology despite the existing constraints. And what are the constraints, and how can we overcome them? Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I feel that I'm turning my back to you when I look over here, but I'll do my best to answer the question. Clearly, the MSMEs are a driver for our economies, and we need to harness technology. We need to help MSMEs acquire the skills they need, not only to work within their markets, but also externally, and that is why we are offering courses that is aimed at providing MSMEs with these skills. We want to take them to another level, but technology alone cannot do that. We need to train them. We need to bring people together. We need to build trust and have them believe that technology is there to empower them, not to replace them. The doom and gloom message is that technology is going to replace humans. But what we want to do is to equip people with the means to make a better use of technology and use technology to automate burdensome taxes. We have some SMEs lacking data systems, and they need information. How, for example, in order to schedule their contacts with clients, they can use these tools to do this. MSMEs are more focused on the client, on being out in the streets, and connecting with people, and sometimes they have 6 or 7 different hats, different roles. Pablo, you know this firsthand. You're a manager, a programmer, you're in charge of financing, of human resources. And all of those tasks are very important to enable the MSMEs focus on what is important for them in order to work to achieve their objectives, their reason they were created, and that's what we want to do, or help them do. A few months ago, we announced a grant of $750 million that is aimed at doing this and to train more than 65,000 people working for MSMEs and working for the public sector, not just so that they can find out about AI solutions, rather to have them adopt and learn to use these technologies to do the work they need to do. So that is our purpose. And that is why we want to use technology to solve real problems. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. You mentioned an important word, and it's trust, and I'd like to come back to that later, if I may. Pablo, one of the strategic initiatives that is part of Chile's current public policy is boosting science and technology-based entrepreneurship and the ecosystem that makes it possible for it to grow in a way that is sustaining and also addresses social challenges. And that approach is meant to increase the chances to scale up businesses. We are here with a foundation. We signed an agreement to create a new startup lab, Point oh One, and IDB Lab is going to be working as part of this partnership in order to bring innovations that are ready for investments in this space in order to help develop them in a responsible manner. Now, in this context and with this great opportunity we have in this new phase of collaboration here in Chile, how do you think the guidelines can help companies to validate what they're doing and consolidate their efforts and grow as fast as the examples Cristina showed us a while ago? We'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for the question. I would say that businesses can use AI to make their processes more efficient. In the case of science and technology-based businesses, it's even more important because AI makes it possible to create industries, not just generate impact or improve productivity. I came back from a meeting in California where there were several companies that were developing genomes that do not currently exist, to create organisms that don't yet exist. They're using AI to see how this would impact drugs and using models so that don't have to be clinical models as we develop these pharmaceutical products. So I think that this type of approach makes it possible to generate productivity. Also, it pushes the frontier of knowledge. AI is happening with another great revolution, which is biotechnology. So they're happening in tandem. So we're at the frontier of creating new industries and new enterprises. So these companies need new knowledge, and that is what enables them to use their business model to scale up and achieve the impact they need. But since new data are being generated and they're the property of the companies, they can then use them with AI to generate completely different solutions. This has two consequences. It creates new industries, and also it makes it possible for them to challenge companies that are not as efficient, and you're able to displace them, and the companies are able to have greater market share. So it is a tool that enables them to better position themselves and to take market share away from established companies that are not doing what startups are doing. In Chile, about 40% of new jobs come from these companies, and many of them have a technology or scientific base. So I do think this has an economic impact for companies rather. It increases productivity and efficiency, etc., but it also has another impact, which is it creates jobs, skilled jobs. So use knowledge to adapt AI, to develop new types of AI, and also to generate knowledge. And that new knowledge is going to be the driver of new models. So I think that this is a virtuous convergence, and we're seeing many companies that have been able to position themselves globally using a combination of new knowledge and their own metadata to generate new tools. I think everybody knows this, but what you just said, how to push that frontier and create new markets, and also take that scientific knowledge to markets. Pablo, as co-founder of NotCo, is practicing what he preaches. So before we go back to Minister Echeverri, I'd like to ask you to give us one example of something that you find exciting. What would be a new market for you? Everything having to do with pharmacology. Not everybody has to be a scientist, but it's important not to use single molecules, as pharmaceuticals have been telling us. There's no single molecule that targets a cell response independently that then becomes systemic. The way nature and the human body works is through cocktails. They're hard to copy because we have a response that is protein-driven. And now, using AI models, we're changing the practice. We're going to be generating a comprehensive response from the organism with very few side effects. And that is going to make for a better patient response to medication. So pharmacology is undergoing drastic changes, and some of those who develop single molecules are the main opponents of this concept. Also, there's another process which I'm very excited by. It's to model a human being with all he or her metabolic reactions and use that to test in silico drugs without having to go through clinical trials and without having to take 10 years to develop a new drug or a medication for a virus, for example. And that needs hard science, it needs data, and it's going to radically change how the industry works. Well, if we needed some inspiration, I think that we have just heard a very good example. So we've heard how SMEs can position themselves when it comes to science and technology, but I'd like to ask Minister Echeverri what happens in the public sector once the AI law is in place. What can we expect? It's interesting how we see stories repeat themselves. In the public sector, we don't work with pharmacology, but we do at the Institute of Health. What we have seen is a growing interest to incorporate AI in different services because of its impact, not just in efficiency, which is very evident, but in improving the quality of services, and that is something that has very positive benefits. What we have seen in Chile is a very rapid proliferation of this implementation. We have more than 100 versions of AI use in public services, ranging from supporting hospitals with diagnosis, also management of hospital beds, which is a huge challenge when our healthcare systems are stressed. Also by public prosecutor's office, they use AI to accelerate investigations. On the Social Security front, there are models that make it possible to forecast who is not going to be able to withdraw their benefits, and also when it comes to the environment. As I was saying, there's more than 100 examples of AI applications, and all of it is having a positive impact on the public sector's response to the needs of the citizens. Now, having said this, and as is the case with any tool, we as a government decided early on to set rules, guardrails. This tool can work very well, but we need to have a certain amount of consensus regarding the conditions under which they're going to be used or implemented. And these rules are not extreme. We need to inform citizens that AI is in use so that they can be aware of their rights. Also, we need to ensure that the services using AI are doing it not just because, but because there is a solution. It is a solution to something they need to solve. Oftentimes, speaking to another human being can lead to a better outcome than a technological tool. And that is a decision that our services have to take and should explore on an ongoing basis. What we have been able to do is, with this law, is to have ongoing development of the systems and to do it in a way that is consistent with our objectives. We want to have a state that is more present and that is more efficient. So it's not just technology for the sake of technology. Now, what is missing? Because we can continue to work as we are now, setting rules, but we know that technology is disruptive at all levels. And that is why last year we decided to work on regulations. We've been asked why so quickly, why not wait and see what happens in other countries like the US, where they develop regulation and are now rolling back those regulations under the current administration. We had long talks with the industry on the scope of self-regulation and how far to go. But after all of that, after all the analyses and having seen what is happening at the international level, I would say that it was the right decision to set ground rules as to where and how AI can be used. And I'd like to take a minute here to say that it's easy to fall into a discussion as to whether regulating these technologies inhibits innovation or slows it down. Some could argue that, but I do think we need to make an effort to look at this more broadly. When we speak of AI, I would say the question the countries and the parliaments need to ask is whether we want the guidelines to be used or AI to be used to generate child pornography videos. The answer is no. We do not want that to happen. Do we want AI to be used to lead children to do things that are harmful to them emotionally or physically? No, we don't want that to happen. So we're not asking whether to innovate or not. We do need to innovate. We need to foster innovation. We need to promote it by using the right tools. But the social discussion of what it is that we want technology to do for our citizens is a discussion that needs to happen. And it needs to take place in the parliaments, not just at the level of businesses, because it has a social impact. It does not just impact a productive process. So we're still working on our bill of law. There's been a very interesting discussion in Congress. Our representatives and we as well have made a monumental effort to fully grasp what is behind the technology without ever losing sight of the fact that this is a discussion about social rules, not about how a technology works. And if we can separate those two worlds, I think we'll be able to take steps in the right direction. Thank you very much, Minister, and I think you just answered one of the questions we had about potential trade-offs or dilemmas we all grapple with. So thank you. Edgardo, I want to discuss another thing with you, and it's infrastructure. What is needed for all of this to be viable? We've seen that in the region, there's been efforts to convert energy into intelligence. These are centers, data centers that are bigger than the National Stadium here, the one we visited yesterday. How do we get ready in Latin America and the Caribbean to equip ourselves with the infrastructure that is needed for all of this to work? It's hard to answer that because we have different circumstances in different countries of the region. But as a point of reference, I'd like to mention the Artificial Intelligence Index as a starting point. It is a way to bring countries in and look at how they compare. We need to look at how prepared countries are to adopt AI, but we also need to consider soft skills. Are they adopting these AI solutions? And it's not just about the size of the countries. We need to see where the different opportunities available to them are. Chile has been leading the charge, but we can't say that Mexico or Brazil lag behind. I think there are different ways of looking at countries' positions, and that is where we find opportunities. So it's not just infrastructure. We need to perhaps focus on learning, training for people to know how to use this. And as the minister was saying, bringing in academia, of course, the governments, and also the private sector. So we need to be more prepared for a better future, and technology should not be something that so technology is used to empower human beings, not to replace them. Thank you. We'll be looking for information about that index. We already have numbers for 2023 and 2024, so I would invite you to check it out. The best rank, or the top of the list in 2024, Chile is number one on the list based on the index. We have 5 minutes left. We have received some questions from the audience. So I will come back to you, Pablo, and also we'll go back to Cristina, because the questions have to do with the challenges in the realm of intellectual property, which you mentioned, and how do we generate the right incentives for some industries like AV so that they can continue to develop. Maybe you could elaborate on the point you made in your presentation and tie this in with what Pablo was saying. He is an entrepreneur, but he also formerly was the president of Fundación Chile and Banco Estado, and perhaps you can tell us what provides the right incentives for companies to continue to innovate in this area. Can you hear me? I think there's a number of incentives. First is the law that was put in place in Chile. It includes tax incentives for pre-competitive development. And Chile has been very smart in the startup world in fostering disruptive policies, and the Startup Lab initiative was instrumental because it enabled companies to be created and also to thrive and scale up. And it's important for companies to have their R&D developments and to have pre-competitive exercises so they can compete on the international market. So I think that what technology does, it also makes some companies more viable than others. I worked with the mining industry, and we see that they have become quite sophisticated. Not only do they have to deal with socio-environmental factors, but also with technology, also green hydrogen. So elements have to be factored in that can make them competitive from day one. So we have public policy tools that can empower the companies. Also, the companies need to have a voice when discussions take place, not just about AI policy. In the case of Chile, I would say that what is missing, well, it's that most of the existing companies, the leading companies in Chile, need to take a more active role in R&D. They must also have closer ties with academia and with research centers and the work they're doing so that they can be on the leading edge. It's not enough to be competitive in Chile. We have a competitive and organized market, but if we want to have a global impact, we also need to be competitive at that level. So we have to take bolder decisions and also develop talent that can also enable us to be competitive at that scale. Thank you, Pablo. Cristina, would you like to come in on this?
The issue of IPR and audiovisual and scientific media. Today, dynamics are different already. It's not the same to develop a synthetic sequence via AI that works as a molecule to cure a disease. What capacity does AI to produce something equally potent today? Intellectual property perfectly protects that sequence. It can be patented. You can have all the economic rights to use it. But the world of creation and cultural industries is very difficult. I don't know how it will evolve there. I don't know whether it will be the same or different as in science. I think it's practically impossible, as I said at the beginning, to determine where inspiration ends and the copy begins. It's very difficult to attribute authorship. I think the dynamics will come from mass use and the success of something that works. The success of creation is that it evokes emotion in the people that will enjoy that artistic creation, and that's what will mark the difference. We will surely use AI at mass levels more than now, but we can't go against technology. Technology needs to flow. Innovation always produces inequality. That's the way it is. We saw it with COVID. If we weren't able to massively produce vaccines, who would have benefited from that process? Well, only those who were in a position to produce them, and the others would have been left behind, and that's what happened. In the Cesar Hidalgo session, who was a great Chilean researcher, said, now everything can be predicted. If this is successful, then we can predict scenarios and what can come to happen and what are the undesirable effects. I think that Chile has been a pioneer country in advancing neuro rights. It's a major right that doesn't get recognition by countries. To look at IP dynamics, it matters. It doesn't, not that much, because we can't distinguish the difference, but that's what we need to determine, and especially protect citizens from undesired effects in the medium and long term. Thank you, Cristina, Minister, Edgardo, Pablo, for sharing your thoughts and your perspective. I think we've learned a great deal. Thank you all for all the questions, those that sent them to us, and let's continue on this path of fostering R&D elevated to the AI. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a Irene, nuestra moderadora, también a los panelistas y a Keynote Speaker por este.
Thank you to the moderator and the panelists for this very interesting seminar, and we thank you for being here with us in person, and to those who are following online and the streaming channels. We will see you in a little under half hour. We will hear from IDB President Elon Goldfarb.
Marsa es una empresa responsable social y ambientalmente. Y en esa línea fuimos los pioneros en obtener la certificación ASC. Nos convierte y garantiza que nuestro manejo acuícola